good afternoon or good morning, whatever time it is of day that you're busy watching this next page. So as I said at the last video, we've got our next double white page, last one with the hole through it. So with this one, we're going to come back into working with lots and lots of different fabrics, and I do mean lots of different fabrics. So I would imagine most people have a basket that's just full of lots of little bits of odds and ends, and this is what we're going to use for this one. So we're going to go for it really. The background for this double page is going to be a plain piece of fabric. So I've chosen a grey because that's the colour that I'm going through. So think of your base colour and get yourself a piece of fabric. It does need to be fairly plain because we're going to work with circles on this one. So we're going to put lots and lots of things on it to decorate it up. Because we're using lots and lots of odds and ends of different types of fabrics, it's quite nice just to have this backing piece. I've cut it just a little bit bigger than my page because I can trim it afterwards, and I've kept that piece longer from the last one because I think when we come to do the join of this, I think I'm just going to wrap that over. Maybe I've got like that little grey bit actually that matches, that comes over, so I'm going to leave that ready to come over the top. So the first thing we need to do is just work out where our hole is going to be so that we're not going to end up doing something over it that then we can't change afterwards. So I'm just pinning this piece on. There we go. Nice to the corners. Let's get it on this first page. There we go. Make sure it's just fitted nicely. So I hope everybody's well in whatever situation you happen to find yourselves in at the moment. But this has just kept me going. I know definitely, I know it's kept a lot of people going. So what we're going to do then is you're going to want to match your pages up so that when it comes back to attaching them together, you've got them so they're going to meet up. Just lift that over. Let's get your edges together. And then where you've got your hole, just get a pen or a pencil and draw around it. Okay. So what I'm going to do then is just make sure that's pinned just around the edge, just so that I know it's not going to move. Oops, there we go. Okay, right, then I just need a thread. So it's one of those things when you suddenly need a thread, you can't find a thread. Let me grab a thread. Oh, got some right here next to me. Right, here we go. I always find when I think I'm being really, really organised, I'm actually not very organised at all. So what we're going to do, just so that we know where this is on our other page, we're just going to stitch around it just to hold it all together for now. So we don't want to cut the hole through until we're ready for joining the page together. But we do need to know where the circle is on the other side. So just where you've got your either pencil or pen mark, whatever it is you've got to use to just draw onto some fabric, because it's on the back side, it doesn't matter. This is a water soluble one, so if I did want to get rid of it, I can just pop a little bit of water on it. So I'm just doing a big tacking stitch all the way around just to hold it all together. And then we're going to be looking for fabrics to start working with our circles. So because we've got the hole coming through and it's a circle, I just thought it'd be quite nice just to use a shape on the next one, but lots of layers of the same shape to create patterns, and using a bit of stitching as well. And also anything else that you've got that's circular. Okay. Right, let's check on the other side so I can see on the other side now I know where my circle's going to be, so that I'm going to sort of stay away from there for a little bit. Just tie that off. There we go. Right, so once I've done that, I can remove the pins from this side, because you don't want to end up stabbing yourself when you're stitching. Okay, flip it back over. So I've got that stitched. I can just pull these pages in. Just pop a couple more pins in. Obviously this will all start stitching down once we start sewing on the top. So I'm not going to tack this background down for this particular page. It's going to be all the circles and the stitching that we end up adding that will stitch it all down. Just make sure it's tucked in to the middle part of your page. I know a few people have asked, why did I make it as a book and why am I working on it in a book instead of lots of different pages? I just think I want it to feel like a full piece as I'm going along, and it sort of gives you a sense of accomplishment because you can keep on looking through and it's getting thicker and thicker and thicker and more tactile as I'm going along. Very addictive, which is why I'm a little bit ahead, so everybody else is just on a few pages behind where I am at the moment, because I've just really enjoyed having the time to do some sewing, just because I love sewing. Sitting on an evening and stitching, sort of been itching to get on with things. Okay, right then, so you can see my book is beginning to look really yummy. So let's come back to this side. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work with positives and negatives. So we're going to have a circle here that's actually going to leave this bit of fabric, and we're going to use stitch around the outside to create the very first circle. So with this one I'm going to just use a pencil just to mark on where that circle's going to go. So I'm just using lots of different things that I've got that are circular. So if I just come back in there, so that guide is just going to remind me where I'm going to stitch up to. Okay, so that's 2 circles, so we'll have our hole. We'll have this one where we're going to seed stitch around the edge and leave that piece of fabric, and because I've used the wadding, it'll sort of quilt up a little bit, so that'll be quite nice. Then's the fun bit. So now we're going to come into our baskets of fabrics. So I'd got this one and I quite liked, I did like it because I thought it's very striking. So what you want to do is just to start to pull out some little bits and pieces of fabrics. They don't have to go together, but I'm sort of take inspiration from a colourway, but also throw some other little bits and pieces in there as well. So it's just having a bit of a rummage. That's quite yummy. Quite like the strong colours as well on that one. Oh, the turquoise is quite nice because it sort of matches in there. Got that one, and probably have some plainer bits of fabric as well. You might have little bits and pieces from previous pages that you've got, and I've just remembered that I talked about last time when I cut the hole out of there, I had kept the hole. I'm busy looking around. Yep, there we go. So I'd got my hole from the other side, so the bit that I'd cut out of here I've kept, and that's going to feature in here somewhere, not quite sure where. So once you've got some fabrics together, it's then just a case of cutting out circles. So, oh sorry, I'm knocking the camera. That way. So I've got all sorts of different things. I've got like different size bobbins to draw around, and my little tins and things like that. So it's just looking for the sort of circles that you've got, so you end up with a range of different sizes. Just pop that there. Fabric pen, there we go. And you're just going to draw around. I know a few people have got die cutters when we've been doing this on some previous projects, and you can actually just cut the circles out ready for you. I don't have that, I'm old school. Pair of scissors, draw around things. So here we go. We're just going to play around with circles to start off with. Okay, so the idea is, I might have another large, a darker one. That colour's quite nice, but I do like to get the spots on the end of that. Do like those spots there. Maybe in a bit of the plain. Yep. So, I know quite a few people have talked about auditioning fabric, and I love that idea. And I just think this page is just going to be so lovely, because this is a real mix of all the different sorts of fabrics that you've got. I'm terrible when I'm doing stuff like this. I can't throw away little bits of fabric, which I think is probably why in my actual work I do like paper stitch collage. I'm not actually as precious over paper as I am fabric. It can end up being terribly precious. I have tried to stop being precious over fabric though. Oh, that's cute. I like that with the dots. Okay, then we need some slightly smaller ones. That's a bit too big. So you start looking round your table. And then we've got some other circles. See what that one's like. Oh, yeah, perfect. Now, if I was doing a Blue Peter, if you're in England, you'll have watched Blue Peter, probably. If you're my sort of age, definitely you'll have watched Blue Peter. And they used to do the, and here's one I had ready earlier. This one I haven't got one ready earlier. Like I said before, all these pages just start off with a doodle. So this is me sort of planning out different pages in the book. So this is the last page that we did. That was the one before. This is the basic plan. So I do have a bit of a paper doodle, but I do find once you actually start playing around with the fabric, things change. Okay, so the idea next is going to be starting to layer up these bits of fabric. So you're going to start creating layered circles, I suppose, really. Go for a plain one, do another one that size. Plain, okay. And you can use as many different fabrics as you want. We've just had a breather with the last one, so this could be a total riot of colour if you wanted. But you could keep it into one colourway, so it might be like grey was my base colour. I could have decided just to use loads of shades of grey, from very pale, nearly white, right the way through to black, or as near to black charcoal grey as you can. So you just remember there's no rights and wrongs to this. You just take the inspiration and run with it and just see what you would like to do. So that one there, so I think that needs a bit of a pop of colour on the top, and then probably another little bit on the top of that. So let's go with maybe a little bit, yeah, can go a bit bigger. This one, there we go. Not very exciting watching somebody just cutting out circles. I think sometimes it's quite nice just to see visually, I suppose, the thought process that somebody goes through. I have loved it when I've seen people's photos of just not only their actual pages, but when they've got their audition, their fabrics already, just to try out and see what they look like. I think that might be quite nice on another colour, but I don't, that's the same size. That's a bit smaller. I've done that shape before. Maybe do that one again, so I've got 3. Yeah, it's just quite nice to see combinations that people put together of like their threads and their fabrics and their little audition for the next page that we're going to do. So hopefully this one's going to keep you going a little bit longer through the summer. And then the next double page that I've got planned is going to be a part 1 and a part 2 to it. Because I just thought I'd like something where it's not just the page, it's got something else in there as well. So I think we do that. We've got the next double page, and then we've got our last double page, and then we'll be on to our cover, depending on what time of year we end up getting there. It could be I end up adding some more pages. You never know. There we go. That's nice. That and that. Probably maybe need to pick out that turquoise. So you can free cut circles out as well. I tend to find if I just hold it with my thumb and just rotate, you can usually get a fairly good circle going on. There we go. So what I'll be doing is just carrying on, playing around with these colours and just building up a few more circles, and I'll come back when that's all done and pinned. Okay, so we've got all this together. I've realised as well that I always say okay so I'm sorry about that. It's one of those things, I think, when you listen back to yourself talking, you realise there's lots of things you keep saying again and again and again. Right, so yeah, it just makes you giggle. I've played around with the fabrics. One of the other things then that I've got are some sort of lace doilies that I had that had some really pretty shapes in the middle. So I've cut the circles out of the middle and just played around with a couple of those just to add probably a little bit more texture into them. I sort of know where they're going to go, but actually at this moment in time it's not that important, because what we're actually going to do is we're going to work on each one of these circles with different types of stitching, and then we're going to patch them onto the background, mainly because stitching through quite a lot of fabric is quite tricky, and it'd be quite nice just to play around with some of these and some different types of stitching. But where I'm going to start is at this end, which is with the seeding stitch. So I have collected together some threads. So I've taken inspiration from the colours that I've got, and I'm just going to use perlé threads for this particular bit. So I've chosen 3 different colours. So I'm going to start with the grey over here and just start doing the seeding stitch, which is going to play around. As I said, we've got positives and we're going to play around with working in the negative for this particular stitch. So seeding stitch is really, really simple. It's basically just up and down, up and down, up and down. Tiny little straight stitches in lots and lots of different directions. It does take quite a while to do. Before I've even started, I've got a knot in my thread. So it's one of those things that's just quite nice to do when you're sat in front of the telly. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all the circles. If you've got them and you really like where they are and you're a bit worried that you might not remember, just take a photo with your phone. So I'm going to take these off. It might even be that when I come to put them all back on again, I might even play around mixing them all up a little bit. Okay, so that out. What I'm going to do is just do where my circle is on here. I'm just going to do a little running stitch around the circle. So the stitch that I do at the front is going to be quite small, and I'm going to leave a gap between, because all I'm really doing at the moment is just fastening these together. Okay, from around the edge. It's quite a nice way to play with this because it really does play with the texture, and using the perlé threads, because they've got a slight sheen on them. The piece of fabric that I'm using on the back here is just a bit of grey linen, so it's quite a matte fabric. That mixture of the two different surfaces then is really, really nice. Okay. Now, when you've done that, to make this work then, the stitching needs to be quite intense. What I normally do if I'm going to do something like this is I'll put something on the radio, listen to a book, or go and pop a film on the telly or a box set or something like that and just chill. If I'm being really naughty, there's usually a bag of chocolate next to me as well. Okay. Let's work our way all the way around, and all that does, it just makes sure that we've got that circle all nicely stitched all the way around, and it gives us a shape to work to. Now, the reason that I've not done it so close together is when you're doing a seeding stitch, what you want to do is have some of the stitches coming out from there as well. So what I mean by that is these are all going around, you'll have some coming out in different directions. So if I start one there, right next to that one, rather than following the circle, you come out so you always come up to this circle. Have some of them that go around and then some that go along. So you may add an extra one in. And then have others that go from the circle. So I've come up on my line, and then I'm going to go outwards rather than round. And then you come back in and just fill in some of the spaces that you've just made. So we're going to do lots and lots of really tiny stitches all the way around. That's going to build up our circle. So you only ever go up to that line that you've drawn, and always work your way out from there. This is going to take quite a long time to do, because what I'm going to do is it'll be, you can start to see that texture now that I'm building up. Here I'll probably start spreading out because we're going to come into our other circles, but around this side here I'm probably going to end up filling that with the majority of the seeding stitch. So it's going to take me quite a long time. Not the most exciting thing to watch. I've got my cup of coffee. I shall probably pop something on my laptop. So I'm working in my inside studio, my sewing room today. The weather's not that nice at this moment in time. Could do a bit more sunshine, I think. Just gone and created my area outside in the garden to sit and sew, and I think I've done it twice. First it got too hot, and now it's too wet. But obviously, being British, it gives us something to complain about. Or something to talk about, should I say. Always like talking about the weather. It's quite therapeutic, this, because you're not having to overthink anything. Really simple stitch, so if you are somebody that's just starting out, oops, with embroidery, you can't really go wrong with just playing around with a straight stitch. Okay, right, so leave it there. So that's where I'm up to. You can sort of see that I've started building up that texture. You can see the circle now is beginning to come out, so this is all going to carry on all the way around. When I come to this bit here, because I know that that's going to be cut out, I'll probably come up a little bit towards it, but I'm not going to get too near that. Once we've actually got the pages joined together and I've cut the hole through, then I'll play around with what I need to do in that particular section, because then I can see what's coming with the other page, because I'll be able to see that hole that's going to go through there. So this is going to be the first thing, is just playing around with positives and negatives and your seeding stitch. Couple of evenings doing the seeding stitching, so hopefully you can see as a stitch how effective that is. It's just lovely. It really sort of highlights negative space. So the tiny stitches that are here, I've got them really condensed in this area. Then I've faded them out. I've got my tacking stitch for my hole, so I've done some around there and then just faded it out and around. So that's our first circle that we needed to make. So the next bit then we're going to start playing with are our layered pieces of fabric that we've got. Rather than tacking them on and stitching in one go, what I would suggest you do is start off working with them just as separate pieces, and just using any stitches you want to start putting them together. So I've got a cotton thread, so again, use any threads that you've got. Try and keep in with your colourways that you've been doing. So if you remember right at the beginning, I'd just picked a section of colours that would really match with the fabrics that I've chosen, and it's just then a case of starting to stitch. So I just decided it was going to be easier because it's circular, and when you work in circular it's quite nice to be able to turn the bit that you're doing as you're rotating, and actually having it in your book and trying to get it done all in one go could be quite fiddly. If you want to put them in and go for it, please do. All I'm doing with all these tutorials really is just suggesting things that you could try. So I'm just using a really simple little running stitch just round the edge. Obviously some of the stitches we will do once we attach them, but if you're wanting to do some little decorative stitches, it's quite nice just to get these done. And as with all the pages, use whatever stitches you're comfortable with. So I know that there have been quite a few people that are new to stitching. Hello, if that's you. And like I've always said, I think in most of my videos, just using a little straight stitch or a running stitch, you can create so many different patterns and shapes. If you have a look on my YouTube channel, I have got a little video that goes through some of my favourite stitches. If anybody wants a little video tutorial just to practice things. Okay, so got all the way around with that. And again with these you can use as many different colours as you want. So I've just done a little straight stitch just around the edge of that one. So I have done my Blue Peter moment. Here's some I got ready earlier. This one I've got a little piece of fabric just behind, and I've just tacked on just a little bit of lace. I've not done that much stitching on that because it was quite flimsy, so I'll probably do more stitching on that one once I actually get it on the piece. This one I've done quite a bit. So you've got some little seeding stitching in the middle, some straight stitches, a little patch stitch, some tiny pistol knots, bit of a blanket stitch with a straight stitch over the top. So just really building up just those patterns. This one's a nice one. I quite like this one that's gone onto this piece of it's like crochet from a doily that I'd got. So again, just this bit here, there's just tiny little cross stitches just all the way around, and then just a little, I call it a patchwork stitch, where you're just going from the edge and off. So if you were putting patches onto some clothing. And then I've got this one a little bit more elaborate with this one. So you've got tiny little French knots in between a blanket stitch, and then a couple of lines of straight stitch around, another blanket stitch, and then a straight stitch around the edge. So you can really play around with these. Once you've got them done, the next job's going to be coming back to your page and deciding where they're going to go. So you can see with my seeding stitch, I'd already got this idea of having a curve there. So that piece is going to fit following that curve. And then I've got another one here. So I was going to pop that one in there to go across. That one's going to go there. That one's going to go there. And then when I finish that one, that's going to go there in my top corner. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 circles, because that one obviously will be done once we cut the hole out. And I always think working with odd numbers is really, really good. So the next job will be to stitch these down. I'm going to keep it quite simple. So I'll probably use maybe a blanket stitch or just a little running stitch around the edge, or you can use any stitch at all, but I need to finish that one first before I actually get them all stuck on. Well, not stuck, stitched on. So if I just get these, I'll just pin them in place just so I sort of know where they're going to go. Having one going across your double page works really nicely, because it just makes it that it's like one piece of work rather than two separate pages. But depending on how you're working with it is fine. Depends on how you want to work with your piece. Like I say, these are not the be all and end all of the rules. Don't know whether not to get that one a bit further in the corner maybe. Now we've got gaps on our page that we can do a number of different things with. Because we're working with circles, it's really going to be up to you what you want to do. We've got a pin behind there. Yep. Yeah, I have done this a couple of times where I had pins in my pieces of work, and when I'd stitched I'd realised that I'd actually stitched over a pin. Possibly not my best, finest moment. A bit hard to get them out as well sometimes when you've done that. Okay, so, ouch. So I've got some circular bits and pieces, so some little rings that are off a doily, I think that I've got. And what you could do is just start playing around with little things like this. I've got some little circular buckles that are quite nice. And obviously we've got buttons. I actually got these buttons off a jacket that I bought from the local charity shop, which I really, really liked. I think they're lovely. Possibly not right for this particular project, but you can then play around adding not too many because you don't want to detract, oh that's nice, from the work that you've been doing. So you could then just play around, just sort of connecting and filling in the gaps. You don't want to go, not too many. People have asked me where I get my linen buttons from, and I tend to look out for them just at vintage fairs, or sometimes I'm lucky and I can pick them up on eBay, but they can end up being quite expensive, especially seeing as though lots of people are looking for them as well. Okay, so you sort of see that I'm beginning just to build some of those circles up. So I think that probably would be okay I need to finish that one off before I start stitching them on. So that'll be the next bit, is making your circles and just having them all pinned on, just having a play around. It might be that you decide once you've got those on that you might want to carry on the seeding stitch, so I might decide not to put those on. So even though I've got them at the moment, I'll probably take a picture of that just to remind me what I've done and keep all these on one side. But once I've stitched these on, it could be that this ends up making it look a little bit too cluttered, and I might decide that I don't actually want those on there. I might just want to carry on with my seeding stitch, because one of the things that you could do with that is draw yourself some circles on, which actually is quite a good idea. This is what I mean about things evolving as you're going along. You could just draw yourself some circles in the gaps and do your seeding stitch and then spread that out from there as well. It could even be that you introduce one of your other colours. So there's still quite a few different options as to what we could do with this particular page, and I will keep talking you through all different ones. So it's up to you. You might even have a totally different idea as to how you would like to build that up, because I do quite like all the buttons and the things like that, but I do quite like, I'll take those off now, just pop them there. I do quite like that calmness, and I just love seeding stitch. So it could be that I actually end up just drawing myself some more circles, and then maybe playing around with that. See, I've just had a thought about that, because you could have some where you've actually done the seeding stitch and you start layering those over the top. Decision. It's just so hard sometimes to make choices. I do sort of know where they want to go. They're facing in the same direction, so I don't particularly like that, so I might turn that one upside down. Over there, and that's, yeah, that one's parallel with my page. Okay, so that's sort of where I'm up to at the moment. I'm going to finish stitching that one. Not sure if it's quite right, that might need it, so I'm still faffing a little bit. So once I've finished faffing and I've got these stitched down, I'll come back and show you where I'm up to with everything. And like normal, I will do some photographs of some of the close-ups of the circles, just so that you can see that little bit of detail, just to give you some ideas as to what you could do with your circles. So happy stitching, and I will be back soon. Okay, so as you can see, I got a little bit carried away with this page, so much so I totally forgot to do any filming in between, because I've just absolutely loved just working on these pages. There are another set of pages as well that as I was doing them I didn't like them, and then I did like them, and now I don't like them. So I'll talk you through what I've done. So before, we'd got the seeding stitching around there, and I'd got my other circles where we'd been doing all the patterns and the stitching on separately, and I was ready to start attaching them. And originally I was going to add into it things that are circles, and I'd got some of these things laid on, and then I mentioned about I really liked the positives and negatives, and I thought about doing two areas here. Well, once I started doing this one, and I've picked out the dusky pink that I've used with some of my stitching, and then did another one here where I've picked out the teal blue. I just absolutely love doing it. So I spent a few evenings just sat stitching, see the back there, just stitching those. Then I've started stitching my circles on. So I've done that in different ways, but just kept it really simple. So just tiny little stitches just around the edge of some of them. This one with a little straight stitch that's gone round. That one I've edged that one with a blanket stitch, and then this one here and the little bit of lace, just pop that through, because it had got these little flowers with little slashes in between. I've done some tiny little bullion knots in between, and then actually attached it with some French knots. And you can see now I've done my hole, so I've cut the hole through, so you've got this sort of like little glimpse of what's coming through the other side. So to do that, it was basically lining the edges up and pinning it, cutting the hole through, and then I've done a blanket stitch just around the edge. But before I did the blanket stitch, I just used a cotton just to bind it, just to hold it together. But you can use any stitch whatsoever. It was a bit fiddly to do because it was just getting everything lined up. So that's our circles page, looking at positives and negatives and decorative stitches. If you did still want to add other circles, so even though I've like laid these on, and part of me does think, oh, I quite like the idea of adding other circles, you might want to do that. But I'm just going to leave this because I've done a bit more stitching on this one, and I really did just like this positive and negative. I think I'm just going to leave that. And because I've got the wadding at the back, once you stitch, it sort of quilts it. So it gives it a little bit of a bit of relief, a bit like trapunto, as if it's been stuffed from the back. But I've really enjoyed that. Now, last time I'd done a separate video on edges, but I've just decided I'm going to add this onto this one. So I've now got all my edges all joined together. So the last edges video, the very first one was just a really simple stab stitch just to hold it all together, and then at the bottom we popped a little toggle, just some beads. The second one was just popping lace in between. Now you can keep repeating these. I'm just giving you ideas as to how you could start putting your pages together, but obviously you can do anything that you would like. So with this one, I've added another little set of beads at the bottom, but this time I've done a stab stitch around the edge, but then I've done a blanket stitch down the edge just in the grey, just to add just a little bit more just to that. The light's not that cracking today, so I've got a little blanket stitch down that one. This one was something that I did with my Sew for the Soul hanging, where I started using bullion knots. So I'm going to demonstrate this in a second because I really like it to get these bullion knots just going round the other side. And all I've done top and bottom is just with some machine embroidery thread. I've just done tiny little stab stitches just all the way through, so you can't see them, but the pages are joined together. I've stab stitched all down here, and then I'm going over with the bullion knots, so I'll demonstrate that in a second. And then with this one, we'd left a piece of fabric over the edge, so all I've done with that is I've wrapped it over and then just done a tiny little stitch just down the edge just to bind that. Okay, so the bullion knot, you get your thread, and it is just doing a bullion knot. It's just, rather than creating a long knot like these, you're going to wrap them round on themselves. So what you want to do when you start is just get inside your page here and just take your thread through to the other side. So you're going to hide that knot. Obviously this is because I'm having to start a new thread. So I've got my perlé thread. So I'll come from this side and come back through the other side where that's coming out, and then get your thread and you wrap it around your needle. You want quite a bit of thread on your needle because you're going to take it nearly to the tip, because it's got to create that loop coming back over. Okay, so if I just hold that. So I've wound that all the way round my needle, and I'm probably at 1/2 centimetre from the end. So then what you want to do, you need to pull the needle now through that wound thread. So you just have to take your time and just sort of encourage it off the end. Just give it a bit of a twist, bit of a wiggle backwards and forwards, just to convince it that it needs to come off the edge. Okay, once you've got it off, then what you want to do is pull that through nice and slowly. Now you need to make sure that this tail bit comes through first. So just work out which one it is you just need to pull to get that through. So what you don't want is a double thread left inside. Okay, right, so I've got my loop here. So I'm just going to carry on pulling through slowly, bring it back over the front, and then go back through, but you're going to then come out where you want your next knot to start. So I've now come out a little bit further down. Okay, so my knot's there, my needle's coming out. Pull it through, and there you've got your loop. So if I do that again, trim that bit off there. Just trim that bit of fabric. There we go. Right, okay, so do that again. So I'm coming through from the front, come out of the back where my thread is. So my needle's here, thread's there. Push the needle not right the way through, I've still got it anchored in to get my thread. And then I'm just going to wind it round, keep moving it up. And it practically, I'd say my needle is, I don't know, 1.5 inches long, maybe. You want enough on so that it's going to create a loop. It is a little bit fiddly, but well worth mastering. So I'm taking it. There we go. Okay, so you can see I've got all that thread wrapped around my needle. So now I need my needle to come through. So I'm just holding this here just so that it doesn't come undone. Grab hold of your needle, and then with my thumb and my finger, I just sort of roll them backwards and forwards and just slowly just start pulling the needle through. At this end, if it's sticking, if you just get your thumbnail and just gently just start pulling the wrapped threads off. Okay, so once it's come off your needle, there we go, just start pulling that through nice and slowly. I keep my fingers here so that I've sort of got my loop, so then I know that this tail I need to pull it through. So it's just a case of just working out which one I just need to pull through, because you don't want a double thread through the centre. So needle, there we go. So I've got that. Then, so I've got my finger there around the loop. Then just let go, bring this forward, pull that a little bit tighter, then go back in at the base of my stitch and come out a little bit further on where I want my next stitch. So that's there, and I'm coming out here. So I've sort of gone diagonally across, and then just pull, and you create these worms. So from the front, through the back, just wrap it round. And I have to say, I mean, some of the pages that people have been sending in, wow, is all I can say. Such amazing work going on. And I'm loving how people are just taking the idea of the page and then adding their own things. So people have been throwing all sorts at it. We've got people that are making it very personal. So they've got items of clothing or bits from people that they're adding to each page. There's one lady who, rather than having a colour going throughout, she's got a piece of lace and she's attaching the piece of lace to every page, which I think is a lovely idea. Let's pull that through. It gets a little bit easier once your thread gets a bit shorter because you haven't got as much of a tail to pull through. There's some lovely colour combinations. And I really love this, actually this particular page, this weaving page, where people have added all sorts, and the Suffolk puffs, where people, I think it's been really interesting where people have worked, when I suggested using a colour, that you wouldn't normally use. That actually, they're really, really nice pages. I think it does surprise people. I know, like with me, with my pinks, I know I chose slightly mucky pinks on my Suffolk Puff page, but I actually quite like pink now, which I never thought I would say. And I know one of my friends, Alexis, would be absolutely killing herself laughing if she could hear me just saying I quite like pink. But I know one of the things both my daughters have noticed is that all the colours that I tend to work with, they describe them as mucky. I like mucky colours. I'm not really a super bright person. I find it quite hard sometimes to work with really bright colours. But I always think it's a good idea to challenge yourself, because I never thought I would work with pink. Yet when I've been looking through my fabrics and my latest dangerous online purchases, it's surprising how many pinks I'm beginning to be drawn to. So again, remember, when you come back in, you come back out where you want your next stitch to start. I really, really like this. I love it as an edging. I just think it's so yummy. And it just shows that I'd never used French knots like this before. And it actually came about when I was looking at some tatting edges on some artist work that I'd seen. And I had a go. It wasn't very successful. And I just thought, oh, could you do that with a bullion knot? I think that's one of the nicest things about embroidery, is you can be very rigid and stick to the rules exactly as they are, or you can break them. But I just thought with this video, because everybody's flying through this book, I just thought if I make this one a bit longer and add the edges in, I could keep you going. The next double page that I've got coming up is going to be a two-parter with 2 parts to it. So there'll be one where we're going to construct the page, and then there's going to be another piece of work that we're going to add to it, which I thought would be quite nice, give you a few different options. And then we've got another double page to come after that. I haven't quite decided what we're going to do on that one yet. And then we've got to consider the cover, which again, I haven't really thought about what I'm going to do on that. But if you are joining in, if you've only just started and you're just having a look through the videos, I hope you're going to join in. But please keep sending me photos. I'll keep doing the community videos, because it's so nice to see what everybody else is doing, but sometimes people don't always send me them. So if you're following on Instagram, just if you search the hashtag sew4thesoulbook and then follow that hashtag, then when you log into Instagram, it'll pop up whenever anybody uses the hashtag, and then if you share, use that hashtag as well. But please add me in at Handmade by Anne, because then I actually get information telling me to come and look. I try and get to have a look at as many as I can, and just comment or do a like or something like that. But if I've missed you out, I'm really sorry. There's just so many. Okay, so when it comes to finishing off, then when you've got to the bottom, just do a little knot just at that last little bit. But there we go. Let's trim that off. There, so then we've got that lovely, lovely edge. I think that's just yummy. I mean, I might even go and fill it with some more. Could even add a contrasting colour. So I've done my mustard yellow so it matches there. Because that side's got the blue and the grey, I could, if I wanted, go in and amongst and put other colours in there So you can keep adding to any of these, even though we've joined pages together, because they're quite thick. If you wanted to go in and add some more stitching, it's quite easy to add stitching without actually going all the way through your pages. Keep getting bits that are all fraying. Yeah, so that's where we're up to. So what you should have at this point then is we've got pages 1 and 2 joined, 3 and 4 joined, 5 and 6 joined, 7 and 8 joined, 9 and 10 joined, and 11 and 12. So we've got 13, 14 and 15 and 16 left to do. So we're going on with our next double white page, and I'll be back with the next video to talk you through what your next challenge is going to be. Enjoy!